vigorous dance, and we warm up every night.
Vigorous is a good word.
Yes.
We did very much the same.
Also, the biggest laugh we've ever had is your line, or some Von Trier shit. Of course. Everyone loves that in Denmark. Tina Rosenmeier would like to ask, are the characters based on certain people, or are they inspired by many actors?
Well, good question, because normally, for most plays, if you were saying, hey, is this based on anything? I would clearly say, no, not really. I tend to make stuff up. This one, however, was a story, and it's different because it's not the characters, like they're not based on the actual actors from the story that I heard, but the event of being asked to have a sex scene on film came from something. So I'll explain that in that years ago, there was a film called Intimacy that was directed by a French director named Patrice Charot. And Mark Rylance was in it and Carrie Fox. And it was based on Hanif Kureishi short stories. Really well done. But there's at least one sex scene in there that was actually performed in the movie. And when I was in England and I was working on a play, an assistant director mentioned to me this kind of, not apocryphal, but a story where they actually got together as actors with their partners to talk about what everybody was comfortable with them actually doing. Like the director wanted them to perform a sex act. And so what was okay, what was not okay. And so I imagine this is crazy. They're sitting around having dinner, as English and Australian people like to do, ordering tea. And in the meantime, they're saying, so can we do this or not do this? Or, so I had no specifics about what really happened, but just the event was so kooky to me that I thought, that's a play, right? That's a play. So I didn't base those, this Steve on Mark Rylance, but the idea of what happened there to Mark Rylance and to Carrie Fox. So it's kind of a yes and no. The characters aren't based on them, but the event itself did take place. And that's where the idea for The Money Shot came from.
And the character Karen would like to know if she reconciles with Beverly or she ends up with Steve or all alone.
Falls firmly into my world of not my responsibility. Haven't thought about it. Where I end a play or begin a play, that's the world of life for them. Even though I may discuss things that have happened in the past or hopes they have for the future or whatever, my ownership ends with the two of them sitting there listening to their partners, and that's as much up to her as it is to me, as me, and maybe even more so. And the audience, the audience. If you lean a certain way, your glass is always half full, then you'll think, oh, well, maybe it'll work out. Maybe this is good for her and Karen, and she and Bev will be together. And if not, maybe it's better that Karen's alone. Think whatever you want. If you're a romantic or a cynic, whatever, that's okay. You come up with your own ending. But that ending is where it stops for me. Is these were the results of the evening that you had. These people ended up upstairs and you're sitting and listening to them, and that's the end of it. So she knows as much as I do, if not more. I take the not in America it's the fifth. Anywhere else it's when Beckett said somebody asked him about what does Waiting for Godot mean, I think, and he was like, why are you asking me? I just wrote it. So it's one of those kind of things that I wrote this much and their lives are this big, so you figure out the rest.
And the next question is from the actor Dan Voss playing Steve. Have you ever considered making The Money Shot into a TV series?
I didn't. I considered making it into a film because I liked how self-contained it was. That you could get together in some estate somewhere and plop these four actors down and really play this out. And that would be fun. And so we played the casting game and talked about who would be who. And the funny thing is, even on stage, for a while we were talking about doing it on Broadway, and we did a lot of readings with a lot of different actors, but there were a lot of American male stars or actors don't want to look bad, don't want to be, cuckolded, don't want to be, don't want to play versions of themselves, so getting them to play that part was harder than I thought it might be. It was hard to get a guy there and really, or the guys who were the most like Steve didn't find it that funny. You know what I mean?
That's funny.
They played it more straight as they read it, and that made it even funnier. It didn't make them want to play it, So, and getting bested by Bev in the wrestling, and there were a lot of things that didn't, sit well with them. So it was relatively. I had to ultimately have a very good friend who I'd worked with for a number of years end up playing that part, because he's a real actor and a real man, and so he knew the value.
He wasn't afraid of.
I wasn't afraid. Wasn't afraid of that. Every night he brought it on. The more he brought it on, the more he could do to make you think Steve was just the biggest blowhard, and had fun with the wrestling, and had a big gag where he threw up afterwards. Like into the hot tub, and all that. He couldn't get enough. So, I mean, that's the kind of guy you want to work with, not the one who's worried about his fragile little ego. So, but yeah, harder than I thought to get that cast. So
I can assure you that our Tom Foz, he is exactly a dream. He plays it so straight and so full of himself. He doesn't even understand his own jokes. I mean, it's fantastic. But talking about our Steve, he's asking, it seems your words are indicating a dislike to Hollywood and celebrities. Do you have any great things to say about stardom at all? How very Steve.
Sure. I think that, there's a lot of times, with privilege comes responsibility, and power comes responsibility, and you can use it in a number of ways. And I think that's certainly indicative of people who have reached a certain platform with their work. And I've seen people use it for both privately / publicly, as in causes and things like that they've brought attention to, but also in their work, it's allowed them to get work that they might not otherwise have gotten, and create films or bring awareness to us of pieces of work that we might not have otherwise seen, novels that get adapted or series that get made. And so a number of good things have come from that. But it's a slippery slope. I think it's very easy to suddenly fall into, no matter where you've come from. It doesn't take too many limousine rides to get very comfortable with limousine rides. It doesn't take too many big parties to get comfortable with, this is the world that I, and to create an alternate reality to the reality that you live in, or that to just become your reality, and to kind of forget or remodel where you came from, or, your origin story. So you have to be very careful when palace doors like that are opened, because the dazzle of the world can really change your perception of what is real and what's not.
And from the fourth character, which is me.
That would be you.
That's me. And I would like to ask, I find that Beverly is the audience advocate, and yours. Would you like a definite snap in her appearance, or is it a growing conflict? We talked about this with the Missy character, because I played it like Beverly's buttons are pushed to a limit she's never experienced before. So I played it with like a courtesy, but an annoying build-up. And then she snaps and she just goes balmy, as we would say in Scotland.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that sounds like the right way to go. Otherwise, there's nowhere to go. If you go too soon. I remember years ago in, I guess it was in London, I was seeing a production of Long Day's Journey into Night. And in the very first scene that Mary Tyrone walked on stage, which is a very long play, it's got the word long in the title, and it doesn't disappoint. It's long. And the very first scene, she came on and she had tears in her eyes. And I thought, whoa, a long way to go tonight, sister, if you're going to start crying now, And so it didn't seem to, and she found many ways to cry. Hats off to her. she found many distinct different ways to cry, but still a lot of crying. So the build, is always important, I think, to a character. The journey, sometimes the journey is very short that you make as a character. They can't all be as long as others. Sometimes you're only on stage for, a couple of moments, but that variety is really what you look for, is how that build goes. And I think Bev is best intentioned.
We try to convey that she's trying to please, she's trying to beg, she's trying to fit in, she's trying to mimic, she's trying to please, she's trying to serve, but none of it works.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's just, and it becomes more and more absurd, and I think she goes in already like, what are we talking about here? Why would we even be talking about this? And yet she, out of pure sort of civility and love of this other person, I'm gonna trust you. I'm gonna respect you enough to listen to what's being said. But it just keeps coming out in this inane, crazy, ever-growing nonsense that, how does one, no matter how normal you are, how can you not react by the time, all those buttons have been pushed? So it sounds like you're following the trajectory that makes the most sense with Bev.
And now Beverly, she's got a question here. Where do you go in LA to have a conversation of worth?
A movie theater. Because you can't have a conversation. And hopefully
I'll let her know.
That, or a museum. Go to the Hammer Museum, go over to Pasadena to the Simon Museum, or those places. Go run up Runyon Canyon like they do in the show with their dogs. Yeah. Get out. That's one of the problems with LA. It's so incestuous. It's so insular that everywhere you go, the conversation is the same. You're surrounded by people in the business or who want to be in the business, and it's constantly, this narcissistic circle, around itself. Even in New York, you don't get that same sense. There's the people who might be in the business, and the people next to you couldn't give a shit. They're there on vacation, and they don't want to listen to your, bullshit about the theater or films. So I think you get a greater sense of the world at large in a place like New York than in LA, which is just kind of serving itself over and over. And that's not completely true. Those are kind of cliches of those two cities, but cliches come from somewhere. And having sat in enough restaurants to know that, it's kind of the conversation everywhere you look. It is harder to find, just people who want to talk about anything else. It's refreshing.
And now our director, Jeremy M. Thomas, would like to ask, do you think that the characters will ever make that movie?
I think if given half a chance, yes, they will. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that people make movies, money, desire, interest, vengeance, people make movies for that reason. I think that Karen and Steve are on the wheel and want to be on that bad enough that, in fact, they probably would, if given the chance, talk themselves into a place where they can believe that it's of worth, that the movie is going to be good for them. It's going to be, they're making something of quality. They're working with people who are interesting and worthwhile, and they certainly could talk themselves into it. Whether the movie gets made, there's so many things that keep people from making them, from taking apart and doing that sort of thing. Yeah. But I think that if they're at the place where they're asking their loved ones if they can do this, I think they're already there. They're ready to do it.
And then next question is, well, we kind of started with that, if you could tell us about your upcoming projects. But I know the answer to that. You can't, because it's LA.
I mean, I don't want to talk too much about what the story is, but I've done a couple of films in the past year or so. I did a little, very small, like dark chamber piece horror film with just 4 actors, which was a lot of fun, called House of Darkness. I just finished a sort of, I don't know what you would call it exactly, but a movie kind of like Body Heat or The Postman Always Rings Twice, with Diane Kruger and a guy named Ray Nicholson. and that's called Out of the Blue. So, I've been